This is TWiT.
You know, you and I were briefly talking about trolls, and especially the ones with credit cards who buy ads in order to do their trolling. This is kind of a new, I hope this isn't a trend. I hope this is something that Twitter is going to put a stop to. But can you tell us about what is happening in the world of paid trolling?
Yes, this is a weird and hard thing to talk about. But yesterday on Twitter, a Twitter troll took out a paid ad that essentially it told transgender people to commit suicide, is what the ad said. And the account was a fake. It was a troll account that was imitating Caitlyn, who you can see there. And she's someone who's been very, supportive of transgender people and women, and kind of fought back against these internet trolls, especially on Twitter.
She works for Wired, right?
Yeah, and so someone essentially was like, okay, well, we're going to create this fake account and say something very, very mean and hurtful. And for some reason, it snuck past Twitter's automated ad scanning system. So when people take out ads, people take out ads all the time on Twitter. So what they do is they have an automatic system that's supposed to identify and flag words that would be inappropriate, but for some reason, this ad slipped through the cracks, and it was removed right away. The account was suspended. But still, just the fact that a machine did not pick up on these words is pretty surprising and pretty disappointing as well.
It certainly is, and it brings up a couple of interesting issues that are related to this. One is that, of course, a big part of the digital revolution, the online, the internet revolution, whatever you want to call it, is the automation of things that used to be done by people. For example, years ago, there was no such thing as the ability to put ads in front of people's eyeballs without human beings looking at that ad and saying, is this what we want to do? Now there's a lot of automation. Yeah, there's algorithmic flagging sometimes where it's sent to a person for a person to say, this looks suspicious. But for the most part, these things are automated. Other examples outside of the world of advertising include recent problems with Google Maps, where there was a recent racial slur, which if you search for it would bring up the White House. There was a recent sort of by submitting different shaped parks, someone was able to, and we reported on the show, to create a logo, the Android logo urinating on the Apple logo, things like that. There's a lot of that stuff going on, and the trolls and haters and the racists and everybody else are figuring out that they can use the fact that nobody's watching the store, nobody's minding the gate in order to slip in their trolling and their harassment because, again, there's no human involvement in a lot of these decisions. What do you suppose Twitter could do besides just hiring 1,000 people and looking at every single ad?
Well, that's probably out of the question at this point, right? When you talk about a company like a Twitter or a Google or a Facebook that are so large, they're trying to keep their business going. They can't possibly, have 1,000 people reading every ad that goes on the site. And so I guess what has to happen is you have to make sure that this technology that you're having set up as the gatekeeper is actually working. And I don't understand how those words, the words from that Twitter ad that we showed, those were pretty graphic words. The word kill alone should automatically flag some kind of person to have to come in and personally verify that that ad is a legitimate one. So I think it's just a matter of, hey, we need to make sure that the technology we're using as a gatekeeper is really up to speed. And a lot of this is still relatively new over the last couple of years. So I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody, but my guess is that this is going to continue to get better over time. I just don't see I don't see bringing someone in to do it manually as the answer.
Yeah, and it also has to be said that Twitter, once again, is at the center of a story about trolling. And it's one of the themes that this brings up for me is something I've harped on a couple of times on the show before, which is that the net effect of trolling, it's not so much about the individual victims, although that is problematic. It's about the larger change that it affects in the conversation and who's allowed to join the public conversation in this digital public square. Now, I'm going to tell you something that happened this morning. I invited a couple of people to talk about this, one of whom was a woman reporter who reported on this story And she declined to come on the show because she said she'd already been harassed by people on Twitter because of her story. And she didn't want to, she just wants it to go away. So this is literally a case in which a public person with a lot to say is being silenced because of trolls, and more to the point, because of Twitter's inability to deal with trolls. And overall, this changes who's involved in the conversation. Lots and lots of women, for example, have left Twitter or have remained silent when they otherwise would have spoken out. And this is the effect of trolling. And this is why we really have to hold Twitter's feet to the fire. It's almost all of these stories are about Twitter.
Well, it's somewhat ironic as well in that typically the argument is that, okay, because you can contribute to the conversation anonymously, it increases people's likelihood of participating in these conversations, right? They're able to say things they might not otherwise say because they're too embarrassed or they're afraid of attaching their identity to it, but in a good way. Of course, in this instance, it's the exact opposite. People who are hiding behind an anonymous avatar are able to quiet or keep others from participating in what should be an important dialogue. So, you know, you see this on Twitter often. It's a big struggle that they're having as a company. You heard CEO Dick Costolo sent out an internal memo. I think The Verge reported on that a couple months ago, where he was basically like, we suck at dealing with internet trolls. And you know, you see it on Reddit as well. You see it on Facebook. You see it on all these social networks where people just say mean things behind their computers or their cell phones. And yeah, it's in Twitter's case, it's been worse than others, and it's something they got to figure out, because who wants to join Twitter when this is the public perception of what kind of happens on the service?
Well, that's exactly right. It's certain types of people are fine with Twitter and certain types of people are not, and that changes what the conversation is. I'd like to reframe this whole conversation and get people thinking along the following lines. There are really two kinds of social networks. There are the kind of social networks like Twitter and Reddit, where you have to ask and beg and plead the company to make the decision to do something about the trolls. And then there are the other social networks like Facebook and Google Plus and others, where you delete the troll's message yourself. The conversations happen within the container of the initial post. So a comment, I can create a community on Google Plus or Facebook where all the comments and all these influence of trolls or non-trolls happen within the container of that initial message. And then as the person who posted the initial message, I can delete the message, I can block the person so they can never comment again in my communities. And somebody in the chat room said, well, this is a slippery slope to free speech, but I disagree with that. On places like Facebook and Google Plus, my profile is the one place in the whole internet where I personally can decide, for whatever criteria I want, who to include, who to exclude. It's like a cocktail party. I can disinvite. If somebody gets drunk and starts breaking things in my house, I don't have to invite them next time. And that's essentially what it's all about. The sites like Twitter and Reddit, I have to go and say, convince them. And then what happens is there's an arms race. So the trolls figure out how to get around it. They're always trying to they always figure out how to get by and get through the whole, get to the point where Twitter and Reddit basically say, nah, it's not really trolling, they're not really threatening anybody's life or whatever, so I'll allow it. Well, they're still silencing people, and I think that's the fundamental problem. And it's really a problematic for Twitter and Reddit, because they're based on free speech. They want this open conversation. Some of the benefits of Reddit and Twitter are basically based on the fact that it's kind of this freewheeling system. So it's not an easy problem to solve, and I'm not suggesting that it is, but I think it's important to, and I'm sorry for pontificating, but I think it's important for people to think about social networks in that sense. On the one hand, you have sites where you have to ask them to, you have to convince them to delete it. On the other sites, you get to delete it. So. Well,
it's really the difference between a public and a private space. Twitter and Reddit, for the most part, are public spaces. Anyone can chime in. Facebook and Google Plus are, for the most part, private. You can certainly find groups or chats or whatever to contribute to maybe a public dialogue. But for the most part, things that happen on Facebook are happening between me and the friends that I've decided I want to show my profile to. So I think that's a big difference, right? It's hard to have a public, open to everybody space where people aren't going to take advantage of that in a really negative way.
Yeah. And one other quick thing, I know we've spent a lot of time on this, but that theoretically is disturbing. On social networks like Twitter, if trolls are going to start, and haters and the rest, are going to start buying ads, that's problematic, because ultimately the advertiser is the customer. I'm not the customer unless I buy ads. So it's like I'm the product. You know, it's like an old cliche. But if you know, I have the feeling that there's lots of this kind of slightly more subtle, well, significantly more subtle trolling that happens in political speech by shady campaign groups and so on, PACs and so on. And this has been going on for a long time. And television and social networks allow this kind of trolling because they're spending the money. They're the customer. And so I just hope that this kind of thing doesn't catch on, and I hope it's not allowed simply because, you know, whoever pays for it gets to do what they want.
Right. And I guess one last point, Twitter recently started allowing advertising on user profiles. So not necessarily with those of Twitter's users who are verified. There's not going to be ads on their profiles because they didn't necessarily want you know, LeBron James to be getting Adidas ads on his profile when he's sponsored by Nike. Those are relationships that they don't want to have to deal with. But you can see this could be a major issue, right? Like, what if you log in and there's an advertisement on your profile for something you completely disagree with? And promoted tweets, as we just learned, can kind of be across this entire spectrum, from brand messaging to people seeking jobs to people doing hate speech. So that'll be something interesting to pay attention to, kind of as that rolls out for Twitter and as we start seeing more ads on user profiles, which is kind of new.
Yeah, and hopefully everybody who has ads on profiles will allow those of us whose profiles those ads are on to complain and to tailor it and so on, and hopefully not too much tailoring. I hate to basically say, I only want ads for, you know, whatever, Budweiser or something like that. That would be weird.